I discovered that not only was my husband in daily contact with his ex-girlfriend, but she knew intimate details about our life that not even my best friend knew. He would share photos of us with her before posting them on social media. And when I confronted him, he called me crazy and insecure, insisting it was just a friendship. Until the day I found the messages where they were planning to meet up while I was away on a business trip. And that's when I set in motion the cleverest plan of my life. One that not only exposed the entire truth, but gave me the very freedom I deserved. And today, I can say that discovery was the greatest blessing in disguise I could have ever received. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped his phone on the bathroom floor. It was 3 in the morning, and I was sitting on the cold tile floor reading message after message between my husband and Jessica, his ex-girlfriend, the one he claimed was just a childhood friend. While in the living room, he slept soundly on the sofa after another fight where he'd called me paranoid, jealous, and insecure. And there I was reading how he told her we'd fought again, how he said I didn't understand him the way she did, how he sent hearts and laughing emojis in conversations that happened every single day, literally every single day. And then I saw it, the message that made my stomach churn, where he'd written, "Next Friday, she's away on a business trip. We can finally see each other without any drama. I'll pick you up at 8. And her reply, "Can't wait, love. I miss you so much," with a broken heart emoji. And there I was, sitting on the bathroom floor of the house I helped pay for, wearing the nightgown I bought with my own money because he never gave me gifts, reading how my husband of 5 years was planning to meet another woman behind my back. And the worst part wasn't even the recent messages. It was scrolling up and seeing this had been going on for months, since before our wedding anniversary, since before the holidays, where I smiled in photos pretending everything was fine while he was texting her under the table. And I remembered all the times I had questioned it, all the times my intuition screamed that something was wrong, all the times he turned it around on me and made me believe I was the problem, that I was crazy, that I needed to be more trusting, that their friendship was important and I was being possessive. And now, here was the proof that I had never been crazy, that my intuition had been right all along, that while I was blaming myself and trying to be a better wife, he was nurturing a full-blown emotional affair with another woman. And in that moment, sitting on the cold floor at 3 in the morning with the bitter taste of betrayal in my mouth, something inside me didn't break. Something inside me crystallized, hardened, transformed. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for explanations or empty promises. I was going to be smarter than that. I was going to plan, to document, to prepare, and when the time was right, when all the pieces were in place, I would walk away from this situation not as the cheated, humiliated wife, but as the woman who reclaimed her dignity and her life. So I took a deep breath, wiped the silent tears streaming down my face, picked up my own phone, and started taking pictures of every conversation, message, every piece of evidence. And I got back into bed beside him as if nothing had happened. But inside, the woman he knew had just died, and a much stronger, much smarter version had just been born. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to thank every single one of you who is here watching and following this story. I know it's not easy to listen to accounts like this, which often stir up old wounds that you may have experienced yourself or are even going through right now. And that's precisely why I share my experience with you here, because I believe that when we put our stories out there, when we share our pain and our victories, we create a network of supports and understanding that can help someone going through the same situation realize that they are not alone, that they are not crazy, that their doubts are valid, and that there is indeed a way out. So, if you're enjoying this content, if you can relate or know someone who needs to hear this, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. Every subscription, every like, every comment shows me that it's worth it to keep sharing these stories, that it's worth being vulnerable and honest about the most difficult moments of my life. And it also helps me reach more people who might need to hear exactly what I'm sharing right now. And please leave your comment at the end of the video sharing your opinion, your experience, or simply a word of support, because that interaction is what makes this community so special. And now let's get back to the story, because you need to understand how I ended up in that bathroom at 3 in the morning, how my marriage, which seemed so perfect on the outside, turned into this emotional mess, and most importantly, how I managed to turn things around in a way I never even imagined I was capable of. Let me go back to the very beginning, because you need to understand who I was before that night in the bathroom. You need to understand how an independent, educated woman with a stable job and decent self esteem found herself trapped in a marriage where she was constantly gaslighted and manipulated. I met Rick at a barbecue with mutual friends 7 years ago. He was funny, attentive, different from the guys I'd known before. We talked all night about movies, music, life plans, and at the end of the night, he asked for my number in such a genuine way that I couldn't resist. The first few months were perfect, the kind you see in movies. He'd pick me up from work, bring me flowers for no reason, plan creative dates, and he introduced me to his family, who welcomed me with open arms. Or so I thought at the time. After a year and a half, we were living together. After 3 years, we got married in a beautiful ceremony that I helped pay for myself because he was investing in his own business that, according to him, was about to take off. And for the first 2 years of our marriage, everything seemed fine. We had normal couple fights, disagreements about money, about chores, about how to spend our weekends, but nothing that seemed abnormal or alarming. The first time I heard about Jessica was 6 months after the wedding. We were having dinner when his phone rang, and he answered cheerfully, saying, "Hey, Jess, how's it going?" He left the table and talked for 20 minutes while my food got cold. When he came back, I asked who it was, and he said casually, "Oh, that's Jessica. We dated a long time ago, but now we're just friends. She's going through some stuff and asked for my opinion." I thought it was strange, but I didn't want to be the annoying, jealous wife right in the first year of marriage. So I swallowed the bad feeling and pretended everything was fine. But the calls continued, always at odd hours, always making him leave the room. And when I'd ask, he would roll his eyes and say it was personal stuff she trusted him with, that I needed to trust him too, that he'd never given me a reason not to. And technically, that was true. Up until then, he hadn't. So I pushed that uncomfortable feeling deeper and deeper down and tried to focus on the good things in our marriage. But slowly, the good things became rarer. Rick spent more time on his phone, grew more emotionally distant, less interested in me. Our sex life became a boring routine that happened maybe once a month, always quick, always without real connection. And when I tried to talk about it, he'd say he was stressed with work, that I was too demanding, that I didn't understand the pressure he was under. I started to notice he'd only share things with me after the fact, like he'd post a photo from some cool place, and I'd only find out he'd been there when I saw it on social media. When I asked why he didn't invite me, he always had an excuse. I was just in the area for work, it was a last minute thing, I didn't think you'd like it, it was just for a minute. And I always accepted the excuses because, after all, he was my husband. Why would he lie, right? Wrong. He would, and he did. I began to notice his mother had a strange attitude toward me. Nothing openly hostile, but those subtle comments that eat away at you from the inside. Oh, what a shame you don't cook as well as his mother. Or, wow, Rick, you've lost weight. Is she feeding you properly? Or when I'd mention a professional achievement, she'd quickly change the subject as if it wasn't important. His sister in law, Patricia, was even worse. She clearly didn't like me and made no effort to hide it, always making comments about how her brother deserved someone who valued family more, as if I didn't just because I worked and had professional ambitions. And Rick never defended me. Ever. He'd stay quiet or sometimes even laugh along as if they were harmless jokes. I started to question if I was the problem, if I was being too sensitive, too clingy, if I should just accept that marriages change over time and that initial passion naturally fades. My self esteem hit rock bottom. I, who had always been decisive and confident, began to second guess everything. Was I pretty enough, interesting enough, affectionate enough? I started trying to compensate by being the perfect wife. I cooked his favorite meals, kept the house immaculate, tried to initiate intimate moments that were mostly rejected with excuses of being tired. I bought him gifts that were met with a lukewarm thanks. And the more I tried, the more distant he became. That's when I started having anxiety attacks. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, struggling to breathe, crying in the work bathroom. And when I told Rick I thought I should see a therapist, he said I was exaggerating, that I was being dramatic, that plenty of people had worse problems, and that I should be grateful for what I had. So I'd swallow my tears and keep pretending everything was fine. The situation with Jessica only got worse. I started to notice that every time we had a fight, even a small one, he would disappear into the bedroom with his phone and stay there for hours. One day, I accidentally picked up his phone thinking it was mine because they looked similar, and when the screen lit up, I saw a message from her saying, "I can imagine how hard it must be for you," followed by a hug emoji. My stomach lurched. I put the phone back quickly before he could notice, but it stuck in my head. Hard? In what way? What was he telling her about me? About our marriage? I started paying closer attention and noticed a terrifying pattern. Every time we fought, he would be angry with me, but his phone would be buzzing with constant notifications, and his mood would improve. It was as if she was his emotional escape valve, the shoulder he leaned on, the support that should have been my role as his wife, but that he outsourced to his ex-girlfriend. And the worst part is that when I tried to be that support for him, when I asked how his day was or if he wanted to talk about anything, he'd answer in monosyllables or say he was tired. But with her, apparently he had the energy and willingness for long, deep conversations. I tried to confront this a few times in subtle ways. Like, "Honey, I feel like we don't talk like we used to. Are you okay?" And he would always turn the tables on me. "Everything's fine. The problem is you're always inventing a crisis where there isn't one. We've been married for years. We don't have to be attached at the hip all the time. You're so needy. You need to get your own life." And I'd feel terrible. Was I really that needy? Was it wrong to want attention and emotional connection with my own husband? I began to pull away emotionally as a form of self protection. If he didn't want closeness, then I would stop offering it. I would focus on myself, my work, my friends. And curiously, that only made everything worse, because then he started complaining that I was distant, that I wasn't showing affection, that the marriage was cold because of me. There was no way to win. If I got close, I was clingy and needy. If I pulled away, I was cold and disinterested. It was a horrible period where I felt constantly inadequate, constantly guilty, constantly doubting whether I was crazy or if something was seriously wrong. My best friend, Julia, started commenting that I seemed different, more subdued, less myself. And when I finally broke down and told her about the marriage, she was outraged. She said this wasn't normal, that no husband should be having daily conversations with an ex-girlfriend while ignoring his wife, that I deserved so much better. But even hearing that from an outsider, I still had trouble accepting it. Because after all, I had made vows. I had promised in sickness and in health, and divorce seemed like such a huge definitive failure. So I kept trying, kept swallowing it, kept erasing myself, until my 32nd birthday arrived. I wasn't expecting anything elaborate, but I at least hoped for a dinner, a small gift, a gesture to show he remembered and cared. I woke up that day hoping for a special happy birthday, maybe breakfast in bed, like he used to do in the early years. But he woke up, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, said happy birthday in a rush while getting ready for work, and left. I spent the whole day waiting for a surprise. Maybe he'd show up at my office. Maybe he'd plan something for the evening. But when I got home that night, there was nothing. No decorations, no gift, no plan. He was playing video games in the living room. When I asked if we weren't going to do anything, he said, "Oh, right, it's your birthday today. Sorry, honey, I had a crazy day. We'll go out for dinner tomorrow, okay?" And we never did. Tomorrow never came. I cried myself to sleep in the bedroom that night, feeling like the least loved person in the world. And you know what I found out later, much later? That on that very same day, he had texted Jessica, telling her how stressful his day had been, how tired he was, and she had replied with words of support and affection. Meanwhile, I, the wife whose birthday it was crying alone in our room. It was after that forgotten birthday that something inside me finally started to crack for good. I began to seriously question whether it was worth fighting for. A marriage where I clearly wasn't a priority, where my feelings were constantly invalidated, where I felt lonelier being married than I ever did when I was single. But I was still afraid. Afraid of starting over, afraid of judgment, afraid of admitting I had failed. So I continued for a few more months in that toxic routine of arguments that led nowhere, of attempts at connection that were rejected, of nights spent sleeping on opposite sides of the bed without touching. Until that day came, the day that would change everything. I was about to go on a 5-day business trip for a training session in another city. I was packing my suitcase when he came into the room and asked when I'd be back. I answered Friday night, and he just said, "Okay," and left. No "I'll miss you," no "be safe," no sign that my absence would make any difference. And it was that night, after another fight about him forgetting to pick up the dry cleaning like he'd promised, a fight that ended with him calling me annoying and controlling before going to sleep on the sofa, that I went to the bathroom in the middle of the night just to wash my face and calm down. But I saw his phone charging by the sink, and something told me to look. I don't know if it was intuition, a guardian angel, or simply years of ignored signals finally screaming loud enough. But I picked up that phone, unlocked it using the passcode, which luckily was still the same, opened his WhatsApp, and there was her name, Jessica. And that's when my life turned upside down and, at the same time, finally made sense. Sitting on that cold bathroom floor with his phone in my hands, scrolling through conversation after conversation dating back months, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Absolute clarity. It wasn't blind rage. It wasn't despair. It was a piercing lucidity that showed me exactly who I had become and who I needed to be again. I read every message with clinical attention, documenting everything mentally. The conversation started innocently in the morning. "Good morning, love," followed by, "How did you sleep?" During the day, he'd tell her details about his work that he never shared with me. In the afternoon, they'd exchange memes and laughs. At night, before bed, it was, "See you tomorrow, babe. Love you." While I, the official wife, got a monosyllabic good night at best, if I got anything at all. I saw conversations where he complained about me, saying I was difficult to deal with, that I didn't understand him, that he sometimes regretted getting married so quickly. And she would respond with constant validation, saying he deserved someone who appreciated him, that she always knew we were incompatible, that if she had fought harder for him back then, maybe they'd still be together. That cut me deeper than any knife. Seeing my husband being convinced by another woman that our marriage was a mistake. But the part that truly transformed me was realizing I had power in this situation. I had the truth. I had the proof. I had the advantage of knowing what they were planning while they thought I was just the foolish, distracted wife. And it was in that moment, at 3:15 on a regular Tuesday morning, that I would no longer be the victim of this story. I would be the protagonist of my own liberation. But I needed to be smart. Screaming and confronting him right then and there would only make me look like the hysterical crazy person he already painted me to be. Throwing the phone in his face would only give him time to invent excuses, delete evidence, and turn the tables. No, I needed a real, concrete plan that would protect me legally, financially, and emotionally. So I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and began. First, I took pictures of absolutely everything, every compromising conversation, every I love you, every plan to meet, every complaint about me, every piece of proof that, at the very least, an emotional affair had been going on for months. I used my own phone and was meticulous, ensuring the dates and times were visible in the screenshots. Then, I opened his email, which was logged in on his phone's browser, and forwarded some particularly revealing conversations to my own email address. I created a hidden folder in the cloud and saved everything there, password protected. I needed to ensure that even if he found out and deleted everything from his phone, I would still have access to the proof. I finished this around 4 in the morning, placed his phone exactly where I had found it, went back to the bedroom, and lay down beside him as he snored peacefully, completely unaware of the time bomb that had just been set. And for the first time in months, I was able to sleep. Not because I was at peace, but because I finally had a purpose, a direction. The next day, I woke up before him, made coffee as I always did, and acted completely normal. When he woke up and came into the kitchen, I said good morning with a smile and asked how he'd slept. He answered, badly, the sofa is uncomfortable, as if it were my fault he'd chosen to sleep there. But I didn't take the bait. I just said, that's a shame, honey, and asked if he wanted scrambled eggs. He looked at me suspiciously, clearly finding it strange that I wasn't angry after the fight the night before, but he accepted breakfast and left for work. As soon as he was gone, I called my office and rescheduled my trip, saying a personal emergency had come up and I needed to postpone it for 2 weeks. My boss was understanding and adjusted the dates. Then I called Julia, my best friend, and asked her to come over. When she arrived and saw my face, even though I was trying to hide it, she knew something serious had happened. I told her everything, showed her the pictures, the conversations, their plans to meet on Friday. She was livid. She wanted to go to his office and cause a scene, but I held her back. I explained that I needed to do this right, that I needed her help, but calmly and strategically. Julia took a deep breath and agreed. So we made our own plan. First, she referred me to a lawyer specializing in family law, a serious and competent guy who didn't create unnecessary drama, but was fierce when he needed to be. I called and made an appointment for that same afternoon. I went alone because I didn't want to involve Julia in legal matters. Dr. Miller greeted me in his office, a man in his 50s with graying hair, a serious demeanor, but a kind look in his eyes. I told him the whole story, showed him the evidence I had collected, and he got straight to the point. Technically, an emotional affair isn't a crime, but these conversations show a breach of marital good faith and are important evidence in a divorce proceeding, especially if you want to file for emotional distress. He explained my rights, how the division of assets would work since we were married with community of property, and advised me to start gathering important documents, certificates, proof of house payments, bank statements, anything that proved my financial contribution to the marriage. I left that office with a folder full of information and, for the first time in a long time, feeling in control of the situation. Over the next few days, I maintained a completely normal routine at home. Rick suspected nothing. I cooked, cleaned, made small talk, and all the while, I was documenting everything. I started keeping a hidden notebook, writing down every time he left the room to talk on his phone, every time he spent hours on WhatsApp and then pretended he was working, every time he emotionally rejected me, but I saw him smiling at his phone. I also discreetly began to separate my things from his. Nothing obvious, but I put important documents in a folder that I took to my car. I gradually moved some clothes and personal items to Julia's house. I organized my finances, calculating how much of a reserve I would need, what my fair share of the house I helped pay for was. At work, I asked my boss if there was a possibility of a raise or promotion, explaining that I was going through personal changes and needed financial stability. She was amazing. Said she was already considering promoting me anyway and fast-tracked the process. Suddenly, my professional life was better than ever while my personal life was falling apart. But I was building my escape, brick by brick, proof by proof, day by day. During this time, Rick continued his double life, completely unaware that I knew everything. He kept talking to Jessica, thinking he was being discreet. He kept making plans for Friday. He kept treating me like a piece of furniture. And I let him. Because with each passing day, I grew stronger, more prepared, more structured for the moment of confrontation. A week before the trip that was no longer happening on its original date, I already had a lawyer, had documented a diary of suspicious behavior, had separated my finances from his, and had even found a small but cozy apartment I could rent on my own if needed. But the plan taking shape in my mind was even more complete. I didn't want to just pack my things and leave. I didn't want to give him the narrative that I was the crazy one who abandoned the marriage. I wanted him, his family, and especially Jessica to know exactly who had destroyed this marriage and why. So I devised something that, to this day, I'm surprised I had the courage to execute. On Thursday, the day before their supposed date, I pretended to pack for my trip. Rick was in the living room watching TV when I casually commented, "Honey, I'm leaving early tomorrow morning. You remember, right?" He didn't even look up from the screen. "Yeah, I remember. Have a good trip," he replied. Not a single goodbye kiss, no "I'll miss you," nothing. Perfect. It was exactly this indifference I needed to not feel a shred of guilt for what I was about to do. That night, he went to bed early. I pretended to sleep too, but I was actually awake, planning every detail of the next day. When his alarm went off at 6 on Friday morning, I got up with him, made coffee, and placed my suitcase by the door as if I were really leaving. He had a quick coffee, gave me a mechanical peck on the cheek, said, "See you Friday then," and left. Little did he know that by Friday, a lot would have changed. As soon as I heard his car pull out of the driveway, I moved the suitcase from the door, officially canceled the trip in the company's system, and called Julia. "Today's the day," I said. She arrived half an hour later with strong coffee and determination in her eyes. We reviewed the plan one last time. She was going to help me with the most important part, the documentation, catching him in the act. Not physically necessarily, but emotionally, catching the lie, the charade. At 7:30 in the morning, I texted Rick. "Made it to the hotel. I'll be in training sessions with no signal, so I won't be able to talk much." He replied, "Okay, take care." Absolute coldness. Perfect. At 8 o'clock, the exact time he had arranged to pick up Jessica, according to the messages I'd read, Julia and I were in her car, strategically parked near Jessica's house. I had found her address through a simple social media search. And there he was, at 8:05, my husband's car pulling up in front of her house. My heart raced, but I kept calm. Julia squeezed my hand. I picked up my phone and started recording. Jessica walked out of her house, And my God, she looked exactly like she did in his Instagram photos that I had stalked. Pretty, well-dressed, a radiant smile. She got into the car, and before they closed the doors, I saw it. They kissed. It wasn't a friendly kiss. It was a kiss of intimacy, of people who had missed each other, of people doing something forbidden and exciting. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't pain. It was confirmation. It was validation for everything I had suspected and been called crazy for suspecting. I recorded everything. The kiss, them driving off together. We followed their car at a safe distance. They went to a charming cafe on the other side of town, a place he'd never taken me, despite my suggestions. They parked and walked in, holding hands. Julia and I waited a few minutes and went in too. We sat at a discreet table with a clear view of theirs. And there was my husband, the man I had shared a bed with for 5 years, laughing, touching her hand across the table, looking into her eyes in a way he hadn't looked at me years. I took discreet photos, recorded short videos, documented everything. We stayed there for almost 2 hours, watching this surreal scene unfold. At one point, I felt the urge to go over there and cause a scene, but Julia held me back, reminded me of the plan. It wasn't time yet. When they finally got up to leave, we left first, went back to her car, and followed them again. They went to the mall, walked around holding hands, went into stores. He bought her a bracelet, an expensive one whose price I saw when we passed by the same store later. He spent more on her in one morning than he had spent on me in the entire last year. We left before they did to avoid being seen and went back to my house. And that's where we began the most important part of the plan. Julia helped me put together a complete file. All the photos, all the videos, all the conversations I had captured from his phone that morning. We organized everything chronologically with dates and times. We created a long but detailed document explaining the entire situation, the emotional affair, the lies, the gaslighting, the years of manipulation. And then came the hardest decision, how to expose this. I could just confront him privately, file for divorce quietly. But where would the justice be? Where would the truth be for the rest of the family who saw me as the problematic wife? So I made a decision that, to this day, I'm not sure if it was morally right or wrong, but I know it was necessary for me. I created a new anonymous email address and sent the complete document with all the evidence to a select group of people. My mother-in-law, my sister-in-law Patricia, Jessica's parents, whose contact info I found on social media, a few of our close mutual friends, and Rick's own work account. I didn't send it to everyone we knew. I didn't want to humiliate him unnecessarily. But I wanted the right people to know the truth. The people who had judged me, who had made me feel inadequate, who had protected him and attacked me. I hit send at 3 in the afternoon, and my heart almost leaped out of my chest. There was no going back. In a few hours, all hell would break loose, and I needed to be ready for what came next. After hitting the send button, Julia and I looked at each other, knowing there was no going back. The emails were sent, the proof was circulating, and in a matter of hours or even minutes, everything was going to start falling apart for them. I decided I wasn't going to wait at home passively. I needed to be prepared for any reaction. So I grabbed a few more important things: documents I had missed, family jewelry that was mine, objects with sentimental value, and took everything to Julia's apartment, where I had already stored other things in the previous weeks. It was 4 in the afternoon when the phone rang for the first time. It was an unknown number. I didn't answer. Seconds later, it rang again, another number, which I also ignored. Then the messages started coming in. First, from my sister-in-law, Patricia, a long, angry text saying I was a horrible person for exposing her brother like that I should be ashamed, that family problems are solved at home and not aired out for everyone to see. The irony of her talking about solving problems at home when she'd spent years making malicious comments about me in public was not lost on me. I deleted the message without replying. Then came a message from my mother-in-law, more restrained but equally accusatory, saying she was disappointed in me, that she didn't expect this kind of behavior, that I could have talked to her before making such a drastic decision, as if I hadn't tried countless times to get her support only to be ignored or invalidated. I deleted that one without replying too, because I owed neither of them an explanation. The person who owed an explanation was Rick, and that moment was yet to come. Around 5 in the afternoon, Julia received a message from a mutual friend saying she had seen the email and was shocked, asking if I was okay, if she needed anything. It was comforting to know that at least some people were seeing the situation for what it really was: betrayal and manipulation, not drama fabricated by a crazy wife, as they were surely trying to paint it. At 5:30, my phone rang with a frantic series of calls from Rick, 8 calls in a row that I didn't answer. Then came his audio messages, his voice agitated, desperate. "We need to talk now. Where are you? What is this insane thing you've done? You've exposed our private life to everyone. Are you crazy? Call me now." And then text messages when he saw I wasn't responding to the audio. "For God's sake, pick up the phone. We need to sort this out. You've got it all wrong. Let me explain, please." None of it moved me. They were the same old tactics: make me feel guilty, make me question my perception of reality, convince me I was overreacting. But this time, it wouldn't work because I had concrete proof. I had photos of him kissing another woman that very morning, videos of them holding hands, screenshots of months of conversations. There was no possible explanation that could erase that. I decided I would respond, but in my own time and on my own terms. At 6 in the evening, I sent a short, direct message. "Rick, I received your messages. I won't be taking calls right now because I need time to process everything I've discovered and documented, including today's date with Jessica, which I witnessed and photographed. You have until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning to get your essential belongings out of the house. After that, I'm changing the locks. My lawyer will be in contact on Monday with the divorce papers. Don't try to manipulate me or play the victim, because this time there's too much proof." He replied immediately, "What do you mean you followed me? You're completely insane. That's stalking, invasion of privacy, and you're the one who went through my phone. I'm going to sue you for this." Typical, trying to flip the situation, making himself the victim. But I was prepared. I replied, "You can try to sue, but my lawyer has already informed me that the evidence is valid, given the reasonable suspicion of infidelity, and the invasion of privacy claim loses its power when there's a breach of marital trust. But feel free to try. In the meantime, 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, don't be late." I then blocked him because I wasn't going to read any more of his manipulations. That night, I stayed at Julia's. We ordered food, and despite all the chaos, I felt strangely at peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, I wasn't policing myself, I wasn't trying to be the perfect wife for a man who didn't even deserve my worst. I was being myself, raw, wounded, but true and free. The next morning, Saturday, I woke up early and went back home, accompanied by Julia and 2 of our other friends, Rodrigo and Mariana, who had offered their support. I arrived at the house at 9:30. He was already there, his car in the driveway. I walked in with my support system and found him in the living room surrounded by boxes. He looked at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. He tried to approach me, but Rodrigo subtly positioned himself between us. "We need to talk in private," he said. "No, we can talk right here," I replied, with a firmness that surprised even me. "Everything that needed to be said has been said. Now it's just a matter of logistics." He tried to argue. "You don't understand. Jessica and I aren't having a physical affair. It's just a friendship that crossed a line. I got confused, but I love you. I choose you." I let out a dry laugh. "Rick, I saw you 2 kissing yesterday. I have photos, videos, months of conversations where you say you regret marrying me, where you plan secret dates with her, where you spend more emotional time with her than with me. Don't try to re-reality now. It's over. His face changed. The mask fell. And for the first time, I saw genuine rage. So that's it? Years of marriage thrown away because you can't accept that I have a friend? You've always been jealous, controlling, and now you're putting on this whole show for what? Attention? Revenge? It didn't hit me the way he expected. I answered calmly, "No, Rick. Years of marriage thrown away because you chose to invest emotionally in someone else while neglecting your wife. Years thrown away because you lied repeatedly, manipulated my perception of reality, and made me believe I was crazy for questioning obviously inappropriate behavior. Years thrown away because you broke the vows we made. And no, this isn't a show. It's a consequence." He was speechless for a moment, then tried another tactic. "And what about family? Everyone's going to know. You've ruined my reputation." "They already know, Rick. I sent them the proof yesterday, remember? And as for your reputation, you ruined it all by yourself with your choices. I just brought the truth to light." He grabbed his boxes angrily. Before leaving, he tried one last shot. "You're going to regret this. You'll see you overreacted, that you misinterpreted things, and by the time you realize it, it'll be too late." I replied, looking him straight in the eye. "The only thing I regret is not doing this sooner, for wasting so much time trying to save something you had already destroyed." He left, slamming the door, and as soon as his car disappeared down the street, I collapsed onto the sofa, not crying from sadness, but from relief, from liberation. Julia sat beside me and hugged me. "It's over," she whispered. It really was over. But despite his dramatic exit, I knew it wasn't completely finished. There was still a lot to sort out. So, in the following days, I began taking practical steps. On Monday morning, I called a locksmith and had all the locks on the house changed. I had 3 copies made, one for me, a spare for Julia, and one for my lawyer. Then I went to the bank and separated our joint accounts. The manager was very professional and helped me understand my rights. I discovered that I had contributed nearly 60% of the household expenses for the last 3 years because his business never took off as he'd promised. This information would be useful in the division of assets. At the same time, Dr. Miller, my lawyer, contacted me to say that Rick's lawyer had called. Apparently, he wanted a settlement. He wanted to resolve things quickly and quietly, which told me he was afraid of more exposure. My lawyer asked what I wanted. I said I wanted the divorce as quickly as possible, that I would waive any alimony or financial support from him, but I wanted my fair share of the house, 60% based on my documented contributions, or we could sell it and divide the proceeds proportionally. He thought it was fair and went to speak with Rick's lawyer. Meanwhile, the narrative out there was divided. His family obviously painted me as the villain, saying I had invaded his privacy, that I had exposed him unfairly, that it was all an overreaction from a jealous woman. But many of our friends, and even some people we only knew superficially, came to my defense, especially women who had been through similar situations and understood exactly what I had experienced. I received unexpected messages of support. A distant cousin of his wrote to me saying, "I always thought something was wrong, but it wasn't my place to say anything. You were so brave. Thank you for standing up for yourself." An old coworker told me she'd gone through something similar and regretted not having my courage to expose the truth. Every one of those messages strengthened me, showed me I wasn't crazy, that my reaction wasn't an exaggeration, that I had done what I needed to do. A week after the separation, my mother-in-law called me. For the first time, she seemed less defensive and more confused. "I need to understand what really happened," she said. "Rick says one thing, the proof shows another. I don't know who to believe anymore." Part of me wanted to hang up on her. After all, where had she been when I needed support? But another part of me wanted at least one person in that family to understand my side. So I told her. I told her everything. The years of feeling inadequate, the hurtful comments, the times I tried to connect and was rejected, the concrete proof of the emotional affair, and the plans for secret dates. She was silent for a long time after I finished. Then she said something that surprised me. I didn't realize how much you were suffering. I just thought you were distant, that you didn't fit in with the family. But now I see that maybe we never gave you a chance to fit in. It wasn't a full apology, but it was an acknowledgement, and that was more than I had expected. I told her I appreciated her honesty, but that the damage was done, that I needed to move on. She understood and hung up. A few days later, I received an unexpected message from Jessica. She said she needed to apologize to me, that she never wanted to destroy a marriage, that Rick had told her we were practically separated already, that it was just a matter of time, that he felt trapped and unhappy. She said she believed him because she wanted to believe him. I read it with a mixture of anger and pity. She had been manipulated too, in a different way, but manipulated all the same. He had created parallel narratives, telling her I was the problem, telling me she was just a friend, living two lives and thinking he'd never get caught. I replied briefly, Jessica, I don't accept your apology because you don't just owe me an apology. You actively participated in something you knew was wrong. Daily conversations with a married man, secret plans, displays of affection that go beyond friendship. You knew, but you chose to ignore it because it was convenient. That being said, I hope you learn from this and never do to another woman what you did to me. I blocked her immediately. I didn't need that energy in my life. While all of this was happening externally, I was undergoing a profound internal transformation. I finally started therapy, something I should have done years earlier. In my first session, when the therapist asked what brought me there, I broke down. I cried out everything I had held in, the entire weight of years of feeling inadequate, of having my reality constantly questioned, of having lost myself trying to be the perfect wife. She listened attentively and then said something that changed my perspective. You survived emotional abuse, psychological manipulation, and systematic gaslighting, and you still found the strength to free yourself. That's not weakness, that's monumental strength. Hearing that from a professional, getting validation that it wasn't an exaggeration, that what I had lived through was real and serious, gave me permission to finally process the trauma without guilt. In the following weeks, the divorce proceedings moved faster than expected. Rick wanted to get it over with, probably because the longer it dragged on, the worse it got for his reputation. We reached a settlement where I would get 65% of the proceeds from the sale of the house, since in addition to my larger financial contribution, we proved I had single-handedly invested in all the renovations and improvements. He didn't fight it much. I think he knew that if it went to court, things could get even worse for him with all the evidence of infidelity. We signed the papers 3 months after that morning in the bathroom. 3 months that felt like an eternity, and yet passed in the blink of an eye. The day the divorce was finalized, I went to dinner with Julia, Rodrigo, and Mariana, the small group that had supported me unconditionally through it all. We toasted not to the end of a marriage, but to the beginning of a new life. In the months that followed, I started reconnecting with myself. I took up hobbies I had abandoned. I started painting again, something I loved to do before I got married, and that Rick always said was a waste of time. I started going to dance classes, made new friends, and slowly, day by day, I rediscovered myself, the woman I was before him, but stronger, wiser, more aware of my own worth. There were difficult moments, of course, nights when I felt lonely, days when I questioned if I had been too harsh, if I could have tried harder. But whenever those thoughts came, I would revisit the evidence, reread his conversations with her, remember how small and crazy I felt in the marriage. And then the clarity would return. No, I didn't overreact. No, I wasn't too harsh. I simply protected myself from continuing in a toxic situation. And that wasn't revenge, it was self-love. Throughout the process, I also discovered other things that further confirmed my decision was the right one. A friend told me that Rick and Jessica started dating officially less than a month after we separated, which proved it was never just a friendship as he insisted. Someone else told me his family was having problems with him because they discovered that many of the debts he had were from expensive gifts he'd given Jessica while telling me we had no money. Each new piece of information, though it hurt, confirmed I had made the right choice. And the best part of it all was realizing that over time, the pain began to fade. There was a day, I think about 6 months after the separation, when I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him at all the day before. It was liberating. Life went on. I bought my own apartment with my share from the sale of the house. I decorated it my way, with the colors I liked, with the furniture I chose, without having to ask for anyone's opinion or approval. I adopted a cat who keeps me company and doesn't judge me. And little by little, I built a routine that brought me genuine peace. Waking up without anxiety, focusing on my work, having time for myself, for my friends, for my hobbies, for simply existing without constantly being in defense mode. And while all of this was happening on my side, I heard through the grapevine that things on his side weren't so rosy. His relationship with Jessica was full of problems. She complained that he was on his phone too much, that he was emotionally distant, that he didn't give her the attention he'd promised. Ironic, isn't it? The pattern repeating itself. Because the problem was never me, and it was never her. It was always him. His inability to be emotionally present, to be honest, to do the hard work that relationships require. I also heard that his relationship with his family was strained, that his mother was disappointed when she found out details he had omitted, that some of his friends had drifted away. And although a small part of me felt a little satisfaction knowing there were consequences, the bigger part of me simply didn't care anymore. He no longer occupied my mental space. He no longer had power over my emotions. He was just a person I once knew, someone who had been a part of my story, but who now belonged to the past. The true moment of confrontation, the one etched in my memory as the definitive turning point, happened 3 weeks after the initial separation. Rick asked to meet in person to discuss the final details of the asset division. My lawyer said it wasn't necessary, that everything could be handled between them. But a part of me wanted this meeting. I wanted to look him in the eye and say everything I needed to say without screaming, without crying, just with the raw truth and my dignity intact. We arranged to meet at a neutral public cafe during the day. I brought with me a folder with organized copies of all the evidence, not because I needed to show it again, but because it gave me a sense of security to know it was all there. I arrived 5 minutes early and chose a table in the corner, my back to the wall, a position of power, as my therapist had taught me. He arrived looking tired, thin, with deep, dark circles under his eyes. A small, distant part of me felt a flicker of pity, but then I remembered all the nights I had cried alone while he was texting another woman. He sat down across from me and started with the predictable script. Thanks for agreeing to talk. I know things got out of control, but I think we can handle this like adults. I shook my head slowly. Rick, there's nothing to handle besides the divorce paperwork. I didn't come here for a reconciliation or to hear empty apologies. I came because you said you needed to talk about the division of assets. So let's get straight to the point. He seemed surprised by my coldness. The insecure, emotional woman he knew no longer existed. He tried another approach. Look, I admit I was wrong, that I let things with Jessica go too far. But you weren't perfect either. You were distant, always focused on work, you never had time for me. And there it was, the attempt to share the blame, to make me feel responsible for his behavior. But this time, it didn't work. I took a deep breath and answered with clarity. Rick, I'm going to tell you something I should have told you a long time ago. The fact that you felt neglected, whether real or imagined, did not give you the right to seek emotional and romantic validation from someone else while you were married to me. If you were unhappy, the adult response would have been to come talk to me, to suggest couples therapy, to honestly ask for a divorce, not to develop a parallel relationship and make me believe I was crazy for questioning it. He tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. And about me being distant, do you remember why I started to pull away emotionally? Because every time I tried to get close, you rejected me. Every time I asked about your day, you answered in monosyllables. Every time I suggested we do something together, you had an excuse. So, yes, eventually I stopped trying. But don't blame me for creating the distance that you dug first. He turned red, started to get flustered. You're rewriting history. I did try. You were the one who was cold, who was never satisfied with anything. I opened my folder and placed the printed screenshots of his conversations with Jessica on the table, specifically the ones where he said he regretted marrying me. Is this rewriting history? I asked, pointing. Or this, showing the messages where he planned their secret dates? Or maybe this, displaying the photos of him kissing her that I took that morning? Because I have documented every lie, every manipulation, every moment you made me question my own sanity. So don't you dare come here and try to turn the tables again. It's over, Rick. The time when your words held more weight than the facts is over. He looked at the photos, and for the first time, the mask fell away completely. I saw shame, anger, desperation, all mixed together. Where did you get these pictures? He asked, his voice trembling. I followed you that day. The day you said you were going to work while I was supposedly on a business trip. I was there, Rick. I saw you kissing. I saw you holding hands. I saw you buy her an expensive bracelet while on my last birthday, you didn't even get me a card. His face crumbled. He put his hands on his head. I'm so screwed, was all he could manage to say. And you know what's funny? I continued. It's that if you had just been honest from the beginning, if you had said you still had feelings for Jessica and wanted to end things with me to be with her, it would have hurt, but I would have respected it. But instead, you chose to keep me trapped in a dead marriage while you lived out a fantasy with her. You made me waste years of my life trying to fix something you had already deliberately broken. You made me believe I was the problem. You made me question my sanity, my perception, my worth. That, Rick, isn't just cheating, it's cruelty. He started to cry, real tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. I'm truly sorry. I messed everything up. I know that now. I looked at him crying and felt no pity, no satisfaction, just nothing. An emptiness where love, anger, and hurt used to be. I know you're sorry, I replied calmly, but you're not sorry for what you did to me. You're sorry because you got caught. Because you lost control of the narrative. Because now you have to deal with the consequences. If I hadn't found out, if I hadn't exposed it, you would still be living this double life, making a fool of me and probably feeling very clever for managing to keep us both. He shook his head. That's not true. I was going to end it with her. I was going to choose you. I laughed, a short, humorless laugh. Of course you were. That's why you arranged to meet her the day after my trip started. That's why you told each other I love you every single day. Because you were going to end it. Spare me, Rick. At least now, at the end, be honest. You owe me that much. The silence that followed was heavy. People at other tables were chatting animatedly, oblivious to the drama unfolding in our corner. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower, more sincere. You're right. I wasn't going to end it with her. I wanted both. I wanted you as my wife, the stable life, the house, the image of success. And I wanted her as my escape valve, the passion, the novelty. I was selfish and a coward. Finally, the truth. Thank you for that, I said. And now, let's get to the point. The house will be sold. I want 65% of the value based on my larger, documented financial contributions. I have all the receipts. I'm waiving any alimony or financial support from you. In fact, I don't want anything that comes from you ever again. I just want what is rightfully mine, and then I want to never have to see or speak to you again after the papers are signed. He nodded, defeated. Fine, I agree. But there's one thing I need to know, he said. Did you ever really love me, or was it all a lie from the beginning? I looked him in the eyes and answered honestly. I loved you, Rick. I loved you truly, completely, in a way that scares me to look back on and see how much I gave. But you killed that love, piece by piece. Every lie, every manipulation, every time you made me feel crazy for trusting my instincts, you were killing what I felt for you. Until that night in the bathroom when I read all those messages, what little love was left died for good and turned into clarity. He wiped his tears. I don't deserve your forgiveness, I know, but I wanted you to know I never meant to hurt you. I shook my head. But you did, and saying you didn't mean to doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't redeem the choices you deliberately made day after day for months, years even. Now about forgiveness, maybe one day I'll get there. Not for you, but for me, so I don't have to carry this weight. But that day is not today. And when it comes, you'll never know. Because you will no longer be a part of my life. We are done here, Rick. We are done in every possible way. He nodded, defeated. We spent a few more minutes sorting out practical details. He agreed to start the process of selling the house immediately, agreed to the proportional split, agreed to sign the divorce papers without contest. When everything was settled, I stood up to leave. He gently took my arm. You'll be happy, he said. You deserve it. I pulled my arm away gently but firmly. I know I do. And for the first time in years, I truly believe it. I walked out of that cafe with my spine straight, my head held high, and an immense weight lifted from my shoulders. I no longer needed his validation. I no longer needed answers. I had everything I needed: the truth, the proof, my dignity, and most importantly, my freedom. In the days that followed, news of our agreement spread. His family finally began to accept that the marriage was really over. I received a message from his mother, more humble this time, saying she was sorry she hadn't realized how serious the situation was and wished me the best. I replied politely, thanking her but making it clear that chapter was closed. My sister-in-law Patricia never apologized, but she did stop with the snide comments. Some people choose pride over integrity, and there's nothing I can do about that. What mattered was that on my side, I had done everything right, as much as possible. I had defended myself without being unnecessarily cruel. I had exposed the truth without inventing lies. I had asked only for what was fair, without trying to destroy him financially for revenge. And most importantly, I had reclaimed my voice, my truth, my power. There was a moment a few days after that final meeting that summed it all up perfectly. I was in therapy, talking about the conversation at the cafe, and my therapist asked, "How did you feel during that confrontation?" I thought for a moment and then replied, "For the first time in years, I felt whole. I felt like myself. Not the small, insecure version he created, but the strong woman I always was and had forgotten how to be." She smiled. "That's called reclaiming your narrative. You took back the power he had to define who you are, and that is true liberation." And she was right. For years, Rick held the pen to my story, deciding how I should feel, what was real, what was an exaggeration. But in that cafe, I took the pen back. And from that point on, I was the sole author of my life. 6 months after that confrontation at the cafe, I was sitting on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping tea as I watched the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. My cat, Honey, was asleep and curled up on my lap, and for the first time in years, maybe in my entire adult life, I felt completely at peace. Not the peace of someone ignoring their problems or pretending everything is fine, but the genuine peace of someone who has made the right choices, weathered the storms, and come out on the other side whole. The first few months after the divorce weren't easy. There were nights I woke up in a grip of anxiety, wondering if I had done the right thing, if I should have tried harder, if it was selfish to want more from a marriage. But therapy helped me process these intrusive thoughts. My therapist showed me that they were the remnants of the manipulation, the last echoes of his voice telling me I was overreacting, that I was the problem. Slowly, those echoes grew fainter until they became distant whispers I could recognize and dismiss. The sale of the house was finalized 4 months after the separation, a faster process than we had expected. And when the money landed in my account, 65% as agreed, I felt a tangible validation of what I had always known emotionally, that I had invested more, given more, been more present in that marriage. I used the money wisely. I paid off all my small debts, made a long term investment, and used the rest for a down payment on a smaller but entirely my own apartment. 2 bedrooms, a balcony with a view of the trees, a sunny kitchen, all of it decorated just the way I'd always wanted, but never could because he found it too colorful, too feminine, too whatever his excuse of the day happened to be. Today, my apartment has yellow walls in the living room, plants everywhere, paintings I did myself, a bookshelf full of books I finally have time to read, colorful pillows on the sofa, and a small dining table perfect for hosting my friends. It's a space that breathes my essence, not a compromise between two different tastes, but purely and simply me. At work, things also blossomed in unexpected ways. Without the emotional weight of a toxic marriage consuming my energy, I was able to focus completely on my career. The promotion I received during the separation process was just the beginning. 3 months later, I was asked to lead a major project that gave me visibility across the company. My boss called me into her office to say she'd noticed a change in me, more confidence, more initiative, more presence. And she was right. I was more present because I was no longer divided, no longer dividing a part of myself at home dealing with anxiety and manipulation. I was whole wherever I was. I also began to invest in myself in ways I had neglected for years. I went back to the gym, not because of aesthetic pressure, but because I realized exercise helped my mental health. I resumed the dance classes I had abandoned early in our marriage because he thought they were silly. And I discovered that those moments of movement and music were almost meditative, reconnecting me with my body in ways I had forgotten were possible. I made new friends too. Incredible women I met in dance class, at the gym, even at a book club I started attending. And one thing I realized is that true friendships shouldn't require you to shrink yourself. They shouldn't make you question your own perception or feelings. These women listened to me, validated me, and challenged me to grow, but always with respect and love, not with manipulation and gaslighting. As for romantic relationships, I decided it wasn't a priority. Some friends tried to set me up. A few men on dating apps showed interest, but I politely declined. Not because I was heartbroken and incapable of loving again, but because for the first time, I was learning to love myself completely, to enjoy my own company, to build a life so full on my own that a relationship would become a choice, not a necessity. My therapist said this was a sign of emotional health, being comfortable alone, not seeking external validation. And I agreed. Of course, there were moments of loneliness, Weekends when I'd see couples on the street and feel a pang, not of regret, but of curiosity about what it would be like to have a true partner, one who would add to my life instead of subtracting from it. But then I'd remember that I would 1,000 times rather be alone and at peace than with someone and constantly anxious. 6 months after the divorce, I ran into Rick at the supermarket. It was strange. My heart sped up a little when I saw him from a distance, not from any romantic feeling, but from a conditioned response after years of associating him with stress. He was with Jessica, pushing a cart together. She looked uncomfortable, staring at his phone with a frown as he replied to messages. For a second, our eyes met. He looked like he wanted to approach, but I gave a slight shake of my head and turned down another aisle. There was nothing to say, no lingering resentment, no curiosity about his life. He simply didn't matter anymore. And that genuine indifference was more liberating than any confrontation had ever been. I told my therapist about it the following week, and she celebrated, saying that indifference was the final stage of healing. Not anger, not hurt, just calm indifference. And she was right. I had been through the anger, the hurt, the grief for the person I thought he was, and I had finally arrived at a place where he was just someone I used to know, someone who was part of a chapter in my life that was now closed. I heard through mutual acquaintances that his relationship with Jessica was in constant crisis, that they fought a lot, that she complained about the same behaviors I had complained about. The irony was not lost on me. He hadn't changed, because the problem was never me or her. It was always him. His inability to have real emotional intimacy, his need for constant external validation, his pattern of seeking novelty instead of cultivating depth. But that was no longer my problem to solve. I also heard that his family had finally started to question his behavior, that his mother was disappointed when she learned more details of the affair, that some of his friends had drifted away. And while I didn't wish him ill, I didn't feel sorry for him either. These were simply the natural consequences of the choices he had made. An important thing happened in the 7th month after the separation: forgiveness. Not the forgiveness he had asked for in that cafe, but the forgiveness I chose to give for myself. I was in a particularly deep therapy session when my therapist challenged me. "Have you forgiven him?" she asked. My initial reaction was defensive. Why should I? He doesn't deserve it. And she calmly replied, "It's not about what he deserves. It's about you freeing yourself from the weight of carrying anger and resentment. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or condoning what happened. It means choosing not to let it define you anymore." It took me weeks to process that. It was some of the hardest emotional work I've ever done. But I finally got to a place where I could say, "I forgive you, Rick. Not because you deserve it, not because what you did was okay, but because I deserve peace. I deserve to move on without carrying this weight. You no longer define who I am or what I'm worth." I said it out loud, alone in my apartment, without him present, because the forgiveness wasn't a gift for him, it was a gift to myself. And immediately, I felt something release in my chest, a lightness I didn't know was possible. After that, things began to flow more easily. A year after the separation, I received an even better job offer, a bigger company, an excellent salary, challenges that excited me. I accepted without hesitation. On my first day at the new job, I looked around the modern office, met the welcoming team, and thought, I wouldn't be here if I had stayed in that marriage. I wouldn't have had the energy to excel at work, wouldn't have had the confidence to take on new challenges. That toxic marriage was slowly killing me, and leaving it wasn't just about ending a bad relationship, it was about saving my own life. I also started sharing my story with other women who were going through similar situations, not publicly or dramatically, but in one-on-one conversations, in a support group I started attending, online in forums where women were seeking advice. It was incredible to realize how many stories were similar to mine. How many women were being gaslighted, manipulated, made to feel crazy for questioning obviously inappropriate behavior. And being able to tell them, you are not crazy, your instincts are correct, you deserve better, was transformative, not just for them, but for me too. Every story I heard, every woman I helped find the courage to stand up for herself, reinforced that I had done the right thing, that exposing the truth wasn't revenge, but justice, that protecting myself wasn't selfish, but necessary. Today, a year and a half after that night in the bathroom that changed my life, I can say with absolute certainty that I am happier alone than I ever was married. Not because marriage is bad, but because that specific marriage was toxic. And recognizing that, having the courage to leave, was the most important act of self love I have ever practiced. My life today is simple but full. I wake up when I want, have coffee while reading a book on the balcony, go to a job I love, come home and paint, dance, talk with friends, tend to my plants, and make plans for a future that is entirely my own. I don't need to ask for permission. I don't need to justify myself. I don't need to shrink myself to fit into someone else's expectations. Of course, I still have challenges, moments of loneliness, difficult days. But the difference now is that I face them all from a place of strength, not desperation. I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. I know I deserve respect, honesty, and a true partnership. And I will never again accept anything less. Looking back, I can see how every piece of that painful journey was necessary. The discovery, the documentation, the planning, the confrontation, the divorce, the healing. Every step taught me something about relationships, about myself, about a strength I didn't know I had. And the biggest lesson of all was that self love isn't selfish, it's survival. That defending yourself isn't being dramatic, it's being healthy. That leaving a toxic situation isn't giving up, it's choosing to live. So today, sitting on my balcony with warm tea, a cat on my lap, and a beautiful sunset before me, I can say without a shadow of a doubt, it was worth every tear, every difficult confrontation, every moment of uncertainty. Because all of it brought me here, to this life I built with my own two hands, this peace I earned with my own courage, this woman I rediscovered from under years of manipulation. And she, this strong, wise, whole woman, she had been here all along, just waiting for permission to exist. And finally, gloriously, she is free. And now I want to hear from you, the person listening to this. Have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever found yourself questioning your own sanity because someone who supposedly loved you made you feel crazy for trusting your instincts? Have you ever felt small, inadequate, or insufficient in a relationship that was supposed to make you feel whole? Have you discovered that the person you shared your life with was living a parallel life you never even imagined? Or maybe you're going through this right now, at this very moment, feeling that tightness in your chest, that sense that something is wrong, but you can't quite name what it is, being constantly invalidated, being told you're too sensitive, too jealous, too needy. If any part of this story resonated with you, please leave your comment down below. Share your experience if you feel comfortable, because when we share our stories, we create a network of support that can save someone. Your story might be exactly what another person needs to hear to realize that they are not alone, that they are not crazy, and that they deserve more. And if you know someone who is in a toxic relationship, dealing with emotional manipulation or gaslighting, please share this video with them. Sometimes all we need is to hear the story of someone who went through what we're going through and had the courage to come out on the other side. It could be the push someone needs to start their own journey to freedom. I also want to leave a very important message for anyone who identified with this story and feels they need more than just the support of friends or even therapy. If you're in a relationship that makes you feel lost, confused, and small, I wholeheartedly encourage you to seek spiritual help, to turn to God. Because when I was at my lowest point, when I felt most alone and lost, it was faith that sustained me. It was trusting that God had a better plan for my life, that He did not create me to live a diminished, manipulated life, and that through Jesus Christ, I could find a strength I never knew I had inside me. I'm not saying it was easy. I'm not saying faith magically solved all my problems, but I am saying that having a spiritual foundation to lean on, having a Christian faith community that welcomed me in my most difficult moments, made all the difference. So if you're going through something similar, if you're feeling lost, I encourage you to find a church near you, to talk to a spiritual leader, to open your heart to God and ask for direction. Because He listens, He cares, and He has a purpose for your life that is so much greater than any toxic relationship or manipulative person. The Bible says that we are the temple of the Holy Spirit, that we are precious in God's eyes, and no relationship that makes you question your worth, that diminishes you, that manipulates you, is aligned with what God wants for you. He wants you to be whole, free, and truly loved. And sometimes leaving a bad situation is exactly what He is calling you to do. Even if it's hard, even if it's scary, trust that on the other side there is a better life, there is peace, there is the version of you that He always knew you could be. So don't be afraid to seek help from friends, from therapy, from lawyers, and especially from God. Because you were not created to live in anyone's shadow. You were created to shine, to be whole, to be free. And if my story can inspire at least one person to take the first step toward that freedom, then every second of vulnerability in sharing this with you was worth it. Leave a like if this story touched you in some way. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I regularly share real stories like this, stories of overcoming, of strength, of women and men who found the courage to change their lives. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos, and most importantly, leave your comment, sharing your opinion, your experience, or simply sending positive energy to those who need it. Every comment here creates a chain of support that can make a difference in someone's life. And remember, if you are in a healthy relationship that helps you grow, that respects you, that values you, be grateful for it and nurture it. But if you are in a relationship that diminishes you, that makes you question your sanity, that manipulates you, know that you have a choice. You always have a choice. It might be the hardest choice of your life, but it could also be the one that saves you. I am living proof that it's possible to rebuild, that it's possible to rediscover yourself, that it's possible to be happy again, even happier than before, because now you know your worth, you know your strength, you know what you're capable of. So don't give up on yourself. Don't accept less than you deserve. And trust that God has a wonderful plan for your life, a plan that does not include manipulation, gaslighting, or any form of emotional abuse. A plan where you are loved, respected, and valued for exactly who you are. And sometimes leaving a bad situation is exactly what He is calling you to do. Even if it's hard, even if it's scary, trust that on the other side there is a better life, there is peace, there is the version of you that He always knew you could be. So don't be afraid to seek help from friends, from therapy, from lawyers, and especially from God. Because you were not created to live in anyone's shadow. You were created to shine, to be whole, to be free. And if my story can inspire at least one person to take the first step toward that freedom, then every second of vulnerability in sharing this with you was worth it. Leave a like if this story touched you in some way. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I regularly share real stories like this, stories of overcoming, of strength, of women and men who found the courage to change their lives. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. And most importantly, leave your comment, sharing your opinion, your experience, or simply sending positive energy to those who need it. Every comment here creates a chain of support that can make a difference in someone's life. And remember, if you are in a healthy relationship that helps you grow, that respects you, that values you, be grateful for it and nurture it. But if you are in a relationship that diminishes you, that makes you question your sanity, that manipulates you, know that you have a choice. You always have a choice. It might be the hardest choice of your life, but it could also be the one that saves you. I am living proof that it's possible to rebuild, that it's possible to rediscover yourself, that it's possible to be happy again, even happier than before, because now you know your worth, you know your strength, you know what you are capable of. So don't give up on yourself. Don't accept less than you deserve. And trust that God has a wonderful plan for your life, a plan that does not include manipulation, gaslighting, or any form of emotional abuse. A plan where you are loved, respected, and valued for exactly who you are. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. Thank you for being part of this incredible community. And may God bless each and every one of you richly. I'll see you in the next video. God bless, and see you soon.